Noah Carter stepped out his car, the late afternoon sun glinting off the police station's glass doors. He took a deep breath, trying to steady the nervous flutter in his chest. He had never been inside a place like this before, and the polished floors, bright lights, and faint hum of fluorescent bulbs made him feel both exposed and overwhelmed. Each footstep echoed in the lobby as he walked toward the reception desk, eyes flicking nervously between the forms stacked neatly on the counter, and the officers moving with quiet purpose. He reminded himself this was just a report, nothing serious, and yet his hands refused to stop fidgeting. As he approached, Officer Aiden Brooks looked up from the desk, tall, broad-shouldered, and exuding quiet authority. Aiden's eyes briefly met Noah's. There was nothing threatening in his gaze, only calm attentiveness. Noah felt a strange warmth at the attention, a pull he didn't understand. He quickly looked away, trying to focus on a reason he was there, but every step toward the counter seemed heavier than the last. "Hi," Noah said, his voice slightly trembling. I need to file a report." Aiden nodded, his tone measured and professional. "Of course. Can you tell me a little about what happened?" Noah swallowed, trying to make the words come out smoothly. He explained a minor incident, a lost package that never arrived. Simple, harmless, YouTube-friendly. But in his mind, it felt more complicated. As he spoke, he noticed the way Aiden leaned slightly forward, eyes focused, hands resting casually on the counter. There was a sense of patience, an unspoken reassurance that Noah hadn't expected. He reached for a pen, trembling slightly. The forms on the counter looked more intimidating than they should have. His fingers fumbled, and a small sigh escaped him. I'm not really sure how to fill this out," he admitted quietly. Aiden moved just close enough to guide him, not overbearing, just present. He pointed to the first section on the form, his hand brushing lightly against Noah's. It was accidental, or at least that's what Noah told himself, but the touch sent an unfamiliar warmth racing through his chest. He looked up briefly, catching Aiden's eyes again, and felt a flutter of something he couldn't name. It wasn't fear or embarrassment. It was something else entirely, something that made his heart race a little faster. As they continued, Noah noticed himself relaxing slightly under Aiden's calm presence. There was a quiet strength in the officer, a kind of reassurance that made Noah's anxiety ebb just a little. He watched Aiden's hands as they moved to adjust the papers, the careful way he explained each step. Everything about the officer was professional, yet there was a subtle undercurrent of empathy, an awareness of Noah's nervousness that he could not ignore. For a moment, Noah imagined this had nothing to do with the report at all. He imagined that this was a rare moment of connection, a pause in a world that belonged only to the two of them. He quickly shook the thought away, embarrassed by his own imagination, but the warmth lingered. Then Aiden excused himself, explaining he needed to check something behind a door at the far side of the office. Noah watched the door close softly behind him, the small click amplifying his anticipation. Alone at the counter, he fidgeted with the pen again, his thoughts racing faster than he could control. Every sound in the lobby, the distant ringing of a phone, the shuffle of papers, the quiet footsteps, seemed magnified. Noah tried to focus on his breathing, telling himself this was just a process, just paperwork, nothing more. And yet, when Aiden's shadow appeared behind a half-open door for just a moment before fully stepping away, Noah felt a jolt he couldn't explain. His chest tightened, and a quiet, unnameable hope stirred inside him. He wasn't sure what it was he hoped for, only that it felt important, and he couldn't ignore it. Minutes passed slowly, each second stretching longer than the last. Noah's hands continued to fidget, tapping lightly on the counter, adjusting the strap of his bag. He glanced toward the door repeatedly, anticipation building, nervous energy tangling with the inexplicable warmth of Aiden's presence. He wondered, briefly, if anyone else would notice the way his heart seemed to skip a beat whenever Aiden appeared, the way a simple, professional gesture could feel like something more. And then, as if sensing his thoughts, Aiden returned with the necessary documents. The moment was brief, casual, but it carried a weight Noah could feel. There was nothing inappropriate, just a professional interaction, but it left an impression, a spark of awareness that neither of them could deny. Noah took the papers, voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," his eyes lingering on Aiden for just a fraction longer than necessary. As Aiden turned back to his duties, Noah felt something shift inside him. It wasn't about the report anymore. It was about this strange, fleeting connection, a bond he didn't yet understand but knew would linger long after he left the station. He adjusted his bag, took a deep breath, and tried to focus on the task at hand, though his heart refused to settle. Even as he prepared to continue with the forms, he couldn't shake the thought that something significant had already happened. Quiet, subtle, and entirely emotional, before a single word of the report was even fully written. Noah sat at the counter, his hands resting awkwardly on the smooth surface, the pen forgotten between his fingers. The lobby felt unusually quiet now that Aiden had stepped behind the closed door. Every little sound seemed louder. The soft shuffle of papers from another desk, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights, even the distant murmur of voices from the hallway. Time seemed to stretch. Each second waited with anticipation. Noah's chest tightened, a nervous rhythm matching the tapping of his foot against the tile floor. He tried to focus on the paperwork, telling himself this was just a simple report. Yet his mind kept wandering to Aiden's brief touch, that fleeting warmth of presence that lingered in his thoughts. Minutes crawled by, and Noah's curiosity grew with each passing second. He couldn't explain why a simple professional gesture had affected him so much, only that it had. His fingers fidgeted with the strap of his bag, then nervously traced the edge of the counter. Every small movement felt amplified, as if the room itself were aware of the tension coiling inside him. He glanced toward the closed door repeatedly, wondering what Aiden was doing, why the absence of his presence felt so pronounced. Then, with quiet efficiency, the door opened and Aiden returned. He carried a small stack of papers, moving with a calm confidence that had already started to put Noah at ease. There was nothing overly deliberate in his movements, nothing that crossed boundaries, but the proximity, the gentle shift of his posture as he handed the documents to Noah, made the room feel smaller, more intimate. Noah's eyes met Aiden's for just a moment, a fleeting exchange that held surprising weight. "Here are the forms you need," Aiden said, voice low and measured. "Let me know if you have any questions." Noah nodded, fumbling slightly as he accepted the papers. His fingers brushed Aiden's hand for a second longer than necessary, and the brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through him. He quickly looked down at the forms, pretending to focus, though his heart refused to settle. Every instinct told him to act casual, to concentrate on the report, but he couldn't ignore the ripple of awareness that lingered where their hands had met. As Aiden guided him through the documents, explaining each section with patience and clarity, Noah noticed how naturally his attention was drawn to the officer's presence. The way Aiden's hands moved as he gestured toward the forms, the calm cadence of his voice, the subtle expressions in his posture, all of it created a quiet gravity that Noah couldn't resist noticing. It wasn't physical attraction in the traditional sense. It was something deeper, more intangible, a feeling that someone was genuinely seeing him, understanding him without words, acknowledging him in a way that made him feel simultaneously vulnerable and safe. At one point, Aiden placed a hand briefly on Noah's shoulder to guide him toward the correct line on the form. The touch was fleeting, professional, yet Noah felt it as if a spark had passed between them. He inhaled sharply, surprised by the intensity of his own reaction. The warmth, the subtle closeness, the attention, it all combined into an emotional tension that he had never experienced before. He focused on the papers in front of him, but his awareness of Aiden's presence never wavered. "Almost done here," Aiden said, his voice soft, encouraging. "Just a few more details." Noah nodded, heart pounding in quiet anticipation. He tried to maintain focus, filling in the blanks, signing the forms, and ticking off checkboxes. Yet every movement, every glance toward Aiden, reminded him that this encounter was different from anything he had experienced before. It wasn't about the report anymore. It was about the connection, subtle, emotional, and undeniable. When the paperwork was complete, Noah set the pen down with a final flourish, his hands slightly trembling. Aiden gave him a small, approving nod, the gesture casual yet meaningful. "You're all set," he said. "Thank you for your patience." Noah's eyes met Aiden's again, and for a brief second, the world seemed to pause. There was no word spoken beyond professionalism, no action beyond the scope of duty, but Noah felt a quiet, resonant acknowledgement of something unspoken, a bond forming that neither of them needed to define in that moment. As Noah gathered his belongings, he realized that leaving the station would mean stepping away from more than just paperwork. He would be leaving behind a subtle, emotional connection that had shifted something inside him. Even as he adjusted his bag and prepared to stand, his gaze lingered on Aiden just long enough to catch a fleeting smile. The moment was brief, restrained, but it left a lasting impression. Noah took a deep breath, straightened his posture, and stepped back from the counter, carrying not just completed forms but quiet, undeniable awareness of the bond that had formed between them, a bond that was emotional, safe, and infinitely compelling. Noah Carter stepped back from the counter, the completed forms tucked carefully under his arm. The police station seemed quieter now, the bustle of officers and civilians fading into a low hum, almost like the room itself had paused to allow a moment of reflection. As he moved toward the exit, he couldn't stop glancing back at the desk where Aiden Brooks stood. There was a subtle shift in the way he noticed Aiden now, a quiet awareness of the bond that had formed during the paperwork, a connection that had left its mark on him, invisible yet unmistakable. He made his way down the hall, the sound of his footsteps echoing faintly against the tile floor. Each step felt heavier than it should, weighed down by thoughts he hadn't anticipated. He tried to remind himself that this was just a routine visit, just a simple report. But the truth was, it hadn't been simple at all. Something had shifted inside him, an emotional awareness, a subtle spark that lingered long after Aiden's brief gestures and calming presence. Noah reached the door, hands fumbling with the strap of his bag. Outside, the sunlight was warm, the late afternoon golden and forgiving. He stepped out, pausing just beyond the threshold, and allowed himself a moment to breathe. The air felt different somehow, as if the world beyond the station had been altered by the quiet intensity of the interaction he had just experienced. He could still feel Aiden's presence in the back of his mind, the calm reassurance, the fleeting touch on his shoulder, the way the officer had seen him without judgment. For a moment, Noah let his thoughts wander, imagining what it would be like to see Aiden again. It wasn't about romantic or physical desire. It was an emotional connection, the understanding that someone had noticed him in a way he rarely experienced. His heartbeat slowed as he acknowledged it, a mixture of gratitude, curiosity, and a longing he couldn't fully name. He adjusted his bag, taking a deliberate step forward, carrying with him a sense of quiet change. Meanwhile, inside the station, Aiden returned to his duties, but something had shifted for him as well. He adjusted his badge, leaned slightly on the counter, and allowed himself a brief, reflective pause. There was nothing overt, nothing inappropriate, just a moment of awareness that the brief encounter had left an impression. He remembered Noah's nervous movements, the subtle fidgeting, the way his eyes lingered on small details as if searching for reassurance. There was an emotional resonance in that brief encounter, a shared awareness that neither could deny. Noah walked down the sidewalk, the city sounds around him muted by his thoughts. He realized that leaving the station didn't mean leaving behind the connection he felt. It would stay with him, quietly shaping the way he thought about vulnerability, trust, and the subtle ways people touch each other's lives. He allowed himself a small, private smile, acknowledging the lingering warmth in his chest, the emotional bond that had quietly formed in a place he never expected. As he moved further away, Noah reflected on the strangeness and beauty of the moment. A simple, routine visit had become something transformative, leaving him more aware of the subtleties of human connection. He understood, for the first time in a long while, how a fleeting encounter could carry weight far beyond its duration, how an emotional bond could linger long after physical presence had ended. Aiden, back at his desk, glanced at the door for a fleeting moment, watching the figure of Noah disappearing down the sidewalk. There was no expectation, no claim, only quiet recognition of the impact a single encounter could have. He returned to his paperwork, but his thoughts lingered on the young man who had come to file a report, noticing things others might have overlooked, leaving behind an emotional imprint that neither would forget. Noah reached his car, paused, and took one last look at the station. He felt a subtle mix of anticipation and curiosity, aware that their paths might cross again, but also understanding that even if they didn't, the encounter had already changed him. He had gone in expecting paperwork, rules, and procedure, but he left with awareness, reflection, and a quiet, undeniable sense of connection. As he drove away, the sunlight casting long shadows across the street, he felt a soft, lingering warmth in his chest. Some encounters, he realized, didn't need to be dramatic or overt to matter. They didn't need grand gestures or declarations. They existed quietly, subtly, leaving marks on a heart that couldn't be seen but could always be felt. And this one, the one behind the door of the police station, would stay with him forever, a gentle reminder of the unexpected ways connection could appear when least anticipated.